What's new in filmmaking technology this week? News, reviews, education, insights, opinions, and ideas from the CineD newsroom with Mino Leitner and Johnny Bahiri. This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome to episode 10 of CineD Focus Chat podcast. Hi, Johnny.
Hi, Nino. How are you?
I'm good. And today, well, this is an anniversary episode, I guess, 10th episode. We made it 10 weeks. Actually, last week you were listening to something we recorded a little bit earlier. It was a kind of a shelf episode, it's fair to say. But now we're topical again. And I'm just going to go through the topics that we're going to talk about.
Please do.
So there has been a lot of discussion online over the last few weeks over the responsibility of tech reviewers, specifically in, like with products and with kind of, like what is the responsibility of a reviewer towards a product and towards a company and also the audience. So we're going to talk from our perspective on this a little bit. Next, I want to talk about virtual production on a budget, because this is something that a lot of people don't have on their radar, that it seems to be coming down in price to actually have a small virtual production setup in your studio. And specifically, we will talk about a motion control head from Kessler, and I did a long interview with Eric Kessler and Chris Field about that and how to actually achieve that on a budget. And lastly, we're going to talk about a little bit more about more product interviews we did. We're still from NAB, but some of which were only published recently, some of which we want to highlight. Okay.
Great. So there's a lot on the table. And shall we start with responsibilities and reviews?
Yeah. Let's give a little bit of a backstory here first. So a lot of you guys will know Marques Brownlee, aka MKBHD. He is the biggest tech reviewer on the internet with almost 19 million subscribers on YouTube. I think he's built himself really a brand over the last, 10 years. I mean, he started this when he was a little kid, actually, from his room, and then he really created this huge channel. And I think it's fair. I mean, he's a very balanced reviewer. He's very good at explaining things. I've always liked to watch his videos, and I think he's very fair and balanced. But lately, there's been a couple of, because of his influence, he's been, from some people, been blamed to frame companies, which I don't think it's true. But the backstory to this is, first of all, the Fisker car. So he has a separate channel called Autofocus, which focuses on cars. And he reviewed a car from Fisker that is a relatively new company that is actually... here it is, this review, and has a title, "This is the worst car I've ever reviewed." It was the Fisker Ocean electric car.
Which looks beautiful, by the way. But
it's beautiful car. It's funny that there's one in front of our door, actually, downstairs. When I was walking here this morning, I saw one.
But it's not all about the look, obviously.
It's not all about the look. And then this was the first one. And then, and to be fair, he wasn't the only one reviewing it, but he's probably the one that gets the most attention, and his videos get watched the most. And if you look at other reviews, you see that they're more than mixed. Like a lot of people were not happy about that car and its performance and what it promised and what it actually delivered. And then a couple weeks or a month later, he released a review of the Humane AI pin, which is, I find it funny. It looks almost exactly like an Apple Watch Ultra if you compare it. And this is a little thing you clip on your chest, and it's supposedly like your AI assistant, has a little projector, laser projector built in. You can hold your hand in front of it, and it's supposed to project information that you ask it onto your hand.
And this company actually raised a lot of money before the product was even shown or seen to the public.
That's the funny thing. A lot of people say he's killing startups, but it's like something that has I think it's valued at over $700 million, and it's supported by Sam Altman and a lot of big names in tech. So anyway, so he criticized that it's very expensive, $700, and still $25 subscription per month, and barely works basically. And last but not least, I mean, that only a few days ago, he released a review of a similar product called Rabbit R1. The review was also called Barely Reviewable. Much cheaper product, $200, no subscription, a lot less functions, but also, very limited in what it can do. And yeah, just watch the reviews. We can put them in the show notes, all the links. I recommend watching them all. He also did a video where he is actually talking about the fact, like, do bad reviews kill companies? Because he got so many people criticizing him. Now,
so how is all of that connected to us when we're doing reviews?
It is connected because we are, it's a smaller niche that we cover, but it's the same thing. I mean, it's we always know that there is a big field of, how should I say that? You get a product to review, and very often they're either not ready, or you have issues with a product. And the question is always, well, first of all, I think it's always important to look at the point in time when we review something, right? We try to get products as early as possible, knowing well that sometimes they might not be the production products. And that's always this fine line that we balance. We pride ourselves to have very good relations to manufacturers simply because we give them feedback. We often get stuff before it's released, so we review it. But most of those things, they will only send us when they are like 99.9% done. And there might be some small things. And as long as the company tells us that this is coming in the production release, or this is coming when the product is actually shipping, it's fine, and we know about it. And if we have issues with products, I think it's fair to say we always communicate with the manufacturer. Like, before we bash, quote unquote, bash anybody online, we wouldn't do that. We are simply tell guys, this is our result. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, it's a very big topic. Yeah.
And well, that's why we have a podcast.
And I'm in my brain trying to think where to even start. Yeah. So let's actually start about the responsibility. Yeah. And I think the responsibility part is very important for us because we are responsible for what we say. That's why we take reviews very, very seriously. And that's why we try not to just wave a camera in front of, like a nice scenery and say, that's the review, but really do and really actually work with a camera and see if we work for the camera or the camera is working for us. And that, of course, depends. It goes the same for other products, because when you work, you want the product to be part of your body, part of your ecosystem, let's say, and work well. As you said, if we find something faulty, we will talk to the manufacturer first. And the idea is just to see if we made something wrong in our review, or actually it is what it is, or something will fix it in the near future. Now, we also have to remember, for example, I'm a documentary filmmaker. So I will try to review cameras in a documentary way. And of course, not all cameras in the market are made for documentary. Some of them are for cinema, suited better for cinema and such. So not only that, we are professionals, and sometimes we do get products which are not labeled as professionals, like 100% professional, to review. Even the iPhone, for example, or I can't even think out of the sleeve right now about a camera, but then we need to adjust our thinking.
Or a lot of cameras that are actually maybe mainly targeted at photographers, and we use them for video.
For video, that's right. So we have to, let's say, compromise our thinking, professional thinking here, and not to judge the camera in a 100% professional way. I think the X100VI from Fujifilm is a good example. This is a fun camera. It's a stylish camera. It's a good camera. The question is it a professional camera? But even if it's not a fully professional camera per se, it still deserves a review, which we are, by the way, finalizing as we speak. Hopefully it will be online next week. But we still want to review it and give our opinion, what we think, and take it into the right perspective, which is an art by itself. So the thing is, do you think we can really kill a product if we review something and the product is not good? I personally don't think so. I give a lot of credit to our audience, and they will check many of the products. They will check also other reviews. I don't think that we can kill a product. I mean, I can give some examples that we were maybe influencing a bit more opinion of people, but I don't think that we can go as deep as killing a product. But we don't have 18 million people following us. That's of course has to be very clear.
It's less people, but in our niche, I think it's fair to say that like we're like CineD is influential enough to make a difference.
An opinion,
and it's of course it will be noticed by less people in general, but in our industry, of course, people notice. Yeah.
I think it's also very important to say that throughout the years, and we are doing it for so many years now, we learned, and sometimes we learn the hard way. It's not what we say, it's how we say it. That's very important. It sounds maybe, there's a very thin balance here. Yeah. We have a lot of respect for the manufacturers. We have a lot of respect to the people who are creating those cameras. As you said, we know them personally. So to be harsh and just rude, it brings us nowhere.
And also, I think you said this before, and I think this is so true. Nobody's trying to make a bad product. Everybody wants to make a good product, and they have limitations too. And sometimes it's time limitations.
Time, money, even internal considerations. This is all okay. This is fine. The thing is that we still have to bring an honest opinion. And some of you guys knows us already. Some maybe don't know us so well. We have only one face here. And that's
two faces. You have
two
one,
faces.
I have
yeah,
one.
Yeah, that's right. So we have to be honest to ourselves and, of course, to the community. But still, it doesn't mean that we want to be rude in any way. So we come up with a conclusion, and I'll go one step before. We are literally studying the product. We are working with this. We are forming an opinion about it. Then if something goes completely wrong, we will approach the manufacturer to understand if we made something wrong or that's how it is or it's supposed to be. And then we always give the manufacturer a chance to respond to our claim. I mean, it's fair enough, no? Just otherwise we...
And the funny thing is, very often, in many, many cases, the reply will be, well, either they are aware of it and are already working on it, or at least they say they are, but then they know from us that it's an issue. That you can sometimes hear from the response is like, oh, actually, one of our engineers kind of highlighted that too. And now that you say it, or one of, like a reviewer is highlighting it, now we know it's even more important to fix this. That's one thing. And the other thing, sometimes they're simply not aware, and we make them aware of something and then they agree to fix it. Very rarely, I think the reply is, this is not a problem, right? And then in the review...
You mean this is a problem, not to fix?
No, I mean, sometimes it very rarely a company would reply, like, we highlight a problem, and then they would reply, no, actually, you're using it wrong or whatever. Like very often, in most cases, they say, oh, okay, actually, that's definitely something we have to address. And we think it's just the right way to do. I mean, we've attended trade shows for over a decade, more than 1.5 decades. And I think one of the things, it's not only the trade shows, we also visit manufacturers and so on, and get exposed to unreleased products and pride ourselves to, never have broken any embargo or anything like that, because we want to help make better cameras, even to the expense of audience, to be honest. I mean, we are not in the clickbaity business, you know what I mean? It's like
we're trying hard not to.
Yeah, we could of course immediately, and like if we found an issue with a major camera, which we sometimes do, or something which is questionable. There's something that we're working on right now, which I don't want to outline now, but there's exactly an issue that we found that other people have also complained to us about, but instead of just putting a video online saying, hey, here's the problem and why did this happen and how can this even be? It's completely different. Actually, we have a whole delegation of that manufacturer visiting us next week to talk about that problem and find out why it happened and what is actually the solution. Because it would benefit, of course, it would benefit our YouTube channel to just say, well, this is horrible and this is bad, and how can they do this? But it would also damage our possibility to actually be exposed to those things and actually have a chance to influence the development.
We are the voice of many of the guys there.
But we're like trying to be the connector between the manufacturers and the people, because we hear from users, we hear from we are shooters, our audience are professional users. They tell us what is the problem with a new product, and we have the ability to talk to the people who actually make the cameras, and that's great. But if that means in many cases we simply cannot go out and just bash something, because of course it would get us a lot of views, but that's not the point. It's
not the point, it's not our way, and it makes zero sense. So we're trying to stay responsible. We're trying to be the kind of mediators, or be the bridge between audience and manufacturers and audience, and maintaining good contact with the manufacturers is part of it, and we are very proud. Yeah. So if you guys have any questions or further questions, how we conduct the reviews or what does it mean, feel free to comment. I mean, it's not a matter of hiding anything. It's just to be transparent as much as possible. But there is one aspect in our reviews, and I want you, Nino, to talk about it, which actually we cannot have an opinion. And I'm talking about our lab tests, which are very, very important for us and also for the community. And we always get a good feedback here. And when we started, let me start from the beginning. Why actually we touched this topic of lab test? Why was it so important for us to make those?
Well, like what you said before with the normal reviews, like you can't compare apples and oranges. Not every camera is made for every purpose. And we're both documentary filmmakers essentially, or commercial and documentary in my case, but we can't judge every camera under the same umbrella, and we're also not able to like put any camera in the real production environment that it needs to be at. You know, like if we did an Alexa 35 review, like a proper review, we would have to put it on a cinema set. And even when we have access to those, we're not allowed to publish footage from that. So it doesn't make sense to review it outside of that environment in a way. So it's always very subjective, those reviews, of course. And we know that, like, because you are doing a different review than I would do of the same camera. You will find different things that I find different, because everybody has a little bit of different way of working, and that's fine. And everybody knows this. But it also means that there is no objective way to compare cameras. The only thing you can objectively compare between cameras is the quality of the sensor. And that's why we have established the lab tests. The lab tests have kind of reduced the...
there's no opinion here.
There's no opinion here, and it's a completely technical, mathematical test that tries to be as objective as possible by highlighting three different things. That is dynamic range of a sensor, latitude, which is very closely connected, like exposure latitude to dynamic range, and I'll explain in a second why, and rolling shutter. So those three things, we were able to establish a standardized workflow with our expert Gunther Machu, who's doing those tests together with Florian
in a very repetitive way.
In a very repetitive way, he's a technical PhD and engineer, and like that's his job. I mean, to do very technically accurate things and in a very scientific way, and dynamic range and latitude, I mean, I think we've explained it before, but I'll say it again. Dynamic range is sometimes not so easy to measure, because it can be influenced by noise reduction in the camera, and almost every camera applies different level of noise reduction these days. So in theory, this means that an iPhone 15 actually has a very, very good dynamic range result, even though the sensor is tiny, even compared to high-end cinema cameras, but it's not an accurate result because the phone applies a lot more noise reduction to get that. And in order to kind of really highlight the quality of the sensor and the real latitude, you have to do a latitude test, which is basically an underexposure and overexposure test meaning you underexpose by a certain amount of stops and then try to pull it back or overexpose and push it down and normalize the footage again, and then you will immediately see the faults of any sensor. And that's what we've done with those lab tests dozens and dozens of times, and actually have it on the CineD camera databases to compare all those results. And those are intended to be very objective, comparative results, which are different from a normal review, of course, because a real life review would be using the camera out in the field, which of course is the much more
realistic
review. But we never said that the lab tests are the only thing that are relevant. You know, like there are a lot of cameras in the market that have actually relatively bad dynamic range, but are great cameras to use. Like very popular also, you know, like because they are just amazing in how they work and the workflow and usability and so on. Yeah.
So usable dynamic range, that's one objective here. And the other thing is, of course, to see how strong the noise reduction is working, because otherwise you can think it's usable, but it's not. And the latitude test helps here. But again, we are sharing those results with the manufacturer prior to publishing the test. We think it's very important that the manufacturer will be ready, will see, and also will respond to our findings. And we give the possibility here. Again, it's learning by doing for us. In the past, that was not the case. But we know now, again, we value the opinion of the manufacturer. They cannot influence our end results unless we did something wrong here. So we always ask them to respond. And I'm very happy to say that so far we've been proved quite right with our result. There was not even a one time that a manufacturer claimed that we did something wrong and we were not able to respond and show that actually we did it right.
They have never been able to prove us wrong, because the way, that's the thing. The reason why we started the lab test was that everybody seemed to just claim
it's a marketing
different
tool.
Numbers of dynamic range, and we were like, actually somebody has to do a test to make these comparable, because there are different. If you look at the lab tests, and there's a very good explanation article actually also about the lab test where Gunther dives into detail on into the detail how they're done, and he explains why it's almost impossible to say, like, this is the number of stops of dynamic range that the camera has just from looking at a chart, because the chart always, you have to decide where does the noise become unacceptable. And a lot of manufacturers simply disregard that, and you just look at the chart, and the chart shows 17 stops, and that's like, our camera has 70 stops of dynamic range, but that's not the whole story, because if the lower 4 stops or 5 stops are not usable, it's meaningless, right? And noise is not noise. That's the other thing, right? There is some kind of noise that is pleasant, that is intended, that is considered cinematic, and there's ugly, blocky compression noise as well, which is there too with some cameras.
So our aim was literally move, because that became a marketing tool. We saw companies printing on their boxes, camera boxes, 17 stops of dynamic range, for example. And the idea was, let's help the users. Let's help ourselves and determine the real number here. And I think we're doing it quite well.
Let's just go back a little bit to this topic of the responsibility. I still think, because you said we're not killing a product, I agree. But of course, it has an influence of what we do, and there's a responsibility. And like also in Marques's case, he gets a lot of the blame in a way now for products that others also reviewed for being problematic. The only thing that I would criticize is that the headlines are very clickbaity. We wouldn't call a product review the worst product I've ever reviewed. It's simply, you do that in order to garner more clicks, and I don't think he needs that at this point. This is something that, is because if you watch the video, it's a very balanced review like all the others, but you can clearly say, well, somebody said on that headline and actually tried to optimize it in a way that the most people, because if you see that on your YouTube stream, of course you click it. Yeah, that's the difficulty here, and of course that would come at the expense of actually getting views. But still, I mean, in terms of the review itself, it's completely balanced. So, and a lot of other people get the same result. And we have the same thing. I mean, like every time we've come up with a conclusion, whether it's in the lab tests or in the normal reviews, I think others have come to a similar or the same conclusion. And that should give people the confidence that, you know, something is really either good or bad or whatever. With a camera, because nobody actually watches only one review, right? A lot of people just are watching a lot of different stuff before they make a purchase decision.
Yeah. Well, it's not only cameras. Lenses is a good example too. For the sake of argument, there are some cine lenses which are on the budget, really good price. They price very well, but they are very, very clean, meaning there is almost no picture aesthetic when you use them. Yeah, and there are other lenses in the market that has a very strong say. Like the aesthetic is very, it's very very strong. I don't know.
Built-in look.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's a thin line here again. Is that look come up because of a faulty glass, or because the lens manufacturer actually doesn't really know how to make lenses?
Well, I never thought about that.
Or it's really intended. Yeah. So that's another thing that we sometimes debating among ourselves. Or when I review a lens and it's very clean, for me it's boring. But on the other hand, it can be manipulated maybe a little bit later. Although that's something that I don't want. I really want to already.
It depends what you want. I mean, there's a philosophy thing. Of course, it's a trend now to create lenses that have a look, because it also gives us more control as the cinematographers.
Sure,
shooters.
but the question is if this look is really intended by the manufacturer, or it comes because of inferior glass and so on.
Well, even if you look back in the old, like if you look at old Kova lenses or whatever from the 70s, 60s, that are now so popular with even high-end cinema shooting and commercials, a lot of those look the way they look because they couldn't do it any better at the time, right? A lot of lenses from East Germany or Russia, whatever, from Soviet times are very popular now because they have a certain look, and I don't think they necessarily intended a certain look. They probably just used what they had and made the best of it, and it just created something. I mean, it's similar in a way. I would almost compare it to, like why are we used to looking at movies at 24 frames per second? It's not because it's technically not possible to shoot 100 frames per second and watch it. It's just we are so used to seeing 24 frames per second and perceive that as cinematic that anything with a higher frame rate is considered, like TV news. And the same, I guess, with lenses, right? Like the less perfect something is, the almost more dreamy and cinematic it's perceived.
Well, the whole thing of 24 frames per second is a bit of a funny thing. It's a bit of an anecdote. I sat with a neighbor. He showed me his new huge television, and he demonstrated a movie. And I told him, that looks very smooth. Are you sure it's correctly, like the setting is correct? So obviously he had the smooth function because the 24 frames per second was too juggly for him. So
well, I guess everybody, everybody's parents, when they buy a new TV, right, watch it like that. The first thing you do is just change it. Yeah. I once was in a like a Best Buy, and I had a remote, and there were like 20 screens, and I realized, it's all the same manufacturer, so I can control all the TVs with the same remote. And I was able to change the setting on all of them at the same time. I felt very proud.
Don't tell the manufacturers, because I guess you killed the sales of this TV by changing. No, you put it on 24, like original thing, and then people looked at it and said, "Hey, it's not smooth."
It's funny in general. In this topic, we know that in Japan they like those high frame rates much better in TVs, right? Like in general.
Well, traditionally, the look is a bit more cooler, to the cool side, and also what used to be 50i and later on 50 or 60p. That's more of a common thing in Japan. That's why, if you remember in the early days, there was actually no 24 or 25p. It was actually more 30p, the maximum for the American market. But it took some time also for the Japanese manufacturer to identify the need and what we want, which is a bit of a different look.
But one thing I want to go back to the review topic. I mean, one thing I think we've frequently had issues with is, and I think it's become, unfortunately, a trend in all the tech industries, not just cameras, to release products that are kind of not finished. Meaning some core functions or functionalities of a product are not in there yet when it's actually getting shipped. In a way, the user is becoming the beta tester. And that didn't used to be the case. I mean, and even if it was, camera manufacturers or some camera manufacturers were better at communicating what functions are coming later and at what point in time. Now it seems like they're all racing to get it out.
It's a race to the bottom.
Read it out as quickly as possible. And if you buy a product when it's released, you're usually the loser because you're missing some core functions. We've had this issue. I've done a review before of a product that I have never released. We have never released because on the day of the release, they issued a firmware update, which added some really core functionalities to the product, which completely obliterated my review. Like the video was done, everything, and they didn't communicate that with, even if they had just said that this is coming, that would have changed things because I could have mentioned it, or I would have decided to just release it a few days later or a week later, whatever. But doing that and releasing something just on the day of the release and giving a firmware update, it's just very short-sighted of a manufacturer if they know that there are reviewers who are actually reviewing the product before it's being released. So that doesn't make any sense. And I think in the past, for example, Sony used to be very good with this kind of stuff. Like I remember the times of the F5, F55 camera, which was like a predecessor of the FS7. When they brought out the F5 specifically, which is a global shutter camera, they said, well, here's a roadmap. In fall of that year, you're going to get this additional function. And then 6 months later, you're going to get this function. And they were relatively conservative with the time frames. So they actually over-delivered. Some of those functions came earlier, which is great, right? But you buy something, you know when it's coming, that's fine. You know, like it doesn't, I'm aware you can't make everything feature complete on release, but you can at least tell people what's coming and a time frame of when it will be coming so they know what to expect. And sometimes even just be aware that something is not in the release yet.
Or will not even be for free.
Or will not be free. Exactly, because that's the next thing. Like if they suddenly decide to charge money for something that originally they told people it's going to be a free firmware update and then it's not, that's upsetting, especially if you spend tens of thousands of euros or dollars on a camera. The more expensive it is, the more frustrating it gets.
I'm actually very curious to hear or to read what our audience think. Would they prefer to buy a camera, which is kind of half-baked, and they buy it based on the information they have, or they are okay to wait a bit longer and get more of a ready product? Because now I think the pace of releasing stuff is simply crazy. I mean, now it's May, and we will see so many releases this month. Anyway, this month that many camera manufacturers are releasing products. So I hope that most of those products are fully ready. But that will be interesting to know what the guys are hoping for. Like it's okay for them if a manufacturer is releasing a camera which is not 100% ready, but it's out there just to be out, or to wait a bit longer, finalize the product, do a proper job, and then release something which is much more matured.
If any manufacturer would go back to giving us milestones, giving us an outlook of what's coming when, and even if they don't know something, because I know we literally are public beta testers as users sometimes now. They wait for the feedback and then decide what to do. But even if that is the case, they should tell us, right? Because they will know, like, for example, if there's a camera that, for example, doesn't shoot 24p yet, just to say anything, but they know they will release that in a month from now, they can say, this is coming in a month from now, but we're not sure about this or that. tell us, right? Like, let us know. And also some obvious things, like if you have cameras that have a sensor that is a 3x2 sensor and the camera doesn't have open gate yet, well, give us an outlook. If we spend over $20,000 on the camera, you might as well, give us a hint whether this is coming or not, because otherwise I might just simply not pay that because I can get a different product that actually does that already. So I think those things are always, they shouldn't be the marketing department's decision, right? They should be, the engineers should say, well, we're working on this, it's coming, and just communicate that with the client. It's part of what you purchase. This upgrade that's coming is part of what you purchase, and it's something that they are working on. And the other things that they're not sure about, tell people they are not sure about it, and that you will wait for feedback.
Yeah. Well, at the end, it's also a great marketing tool when you kind of buy with confidence. So you buy the camera, and if it's not 100% ready, you get kind of a guarantee from the manufacturer that at a certain time, at a certain there's a clear roadmap and what is coming, and and make a decision if to buy that camera or not.
Yeah.
Good. I think
it's an endless subject. It would also go into the topics of, having different levels of camera from the same manufacturer with different functions, and sometimes the newer lower end models, in some cases,
are more advanced.
Are more advanced and actually outperforming the higher end models in some cases. That is also something that a lot of people have issues with, understandably.
Well, I actually let's say differently. I think in recent years we saw how the pyramid is kind of twisting itself. If in the old days manufacturers used to show high-end functions in a high-end camera, and then those functions might go down to the more common cameras, I think since the DSLR revolution, mirrorless revolution, that thing completely flipped. First, you introduce, for example, a good autofocus in a consumer camera. You verify that it's work well, and then you can take it up to a more professional product. And we can see this with the Burano, for example, is a good example. Sony has a lot of expertise now with autofocus in the consumer, prosumer, professional mirrorless cameras. And finally, that specific function found its way to a Burano, which is a professional camera. So that's a good example how things changed or are changing.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you also have the Alpha series, for example, where there was a lot of, we talked about this before, I think, but that the Alpha 1 didn't receive as many updates as some lower end models. But actually, I think they have done a good job at trying to fix this. We've seen recent updates to Sony cameras that are now adding updates to those cameras, and also the A7S III, which have kind of been neglected in favor of some other cameras. So they are aware of this problem. And this is also one of the feedbacks that we gave them and many others gave them, that you don't want to spend 8,000-9,000 on an Alpha camera and then not be sure whether it gets those updates. I think they got that message. I think they're working on that now. So that's one of those examples where our feedback, and also, of course, a lot of other people's feedback, actually makes a difference. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So I think we covered this responsibility review stuff, and also went a little bit on a broader thing.
I mean, it's a broad topic, and I think there's much more to talk about, but we really invite you to email us questions, comments to podcast@cined.com, or just comment on this video, or on, if you're listening to this on any of the podcasting platforms, you can also comment on the article or whatever. We will read it. We will get back to you with any questions about this topic. All right, let's move on a little bit. There is a recent interview that I actually did before NAB, which we decided to release after NAB, so it gets a little bit more attention. Virtual production is still considered a very high-end game, right? It's like, when we hear virtual productions, a lot of independent shooters kind of lose the attention because they're like, it's not for me. This is for high end.
It's not for me.
That's the thing. It's complicated. It's like, we all think of those huge volume stages that are surrounded by LCD screens and like seamless put together to create the illusion of being on location when you're not. And it comes with a lot of challenges. Everybody who I've talked to who has worked on those says it can be very cumbersome. It's a very, well, first of all, it's a very expensive process. I mean, usually you pay at least $10,000 to shoot in one of those per day. You need a lot of people operating the stuff. You need trackers. Trackers are sometimes very large. You need to hide them so they don't show up in shots. Because the challenge is, of course, when you usually have the camera, sometimes on a dolly, sometimes on a crane, on a slider, even handheld, the virtual background needs to recreate that parallax movement. So just because I have screens behind of you showing an environment, as soon as I move the camera, I immediately realize this is fake, because if the environment wouldn't do a synchronized move with a camera, wouldn't make any sense.
So what's new here? I mean,
in general, there's different type of plates. Of course, there's plates that are actually shot. So, for example, if you do a car scene, you just shoot those plates at the speed that you need the car to go in shot. So you need to decide that, of course, because otherwise the motion blur is different. You can, of course, slightly alter this, but car is easy, a train is easy. But as soon as you have a static environment, you can't actually really use filmed backgrounds, because you couldn't recreate the parallax movement of all the elements that are displayed in the background. So let's say I would have a background of you standing in a field with, like grass in the background, and then further away the horizon and, some trees in between. I would do the movement, and it immediately, if it's just filmed and it wouldn't be 3D or actually show the parallax movement, it wouldn't be realistic. Also, changing the field of view on the camera, meaning having a different focal length, would also, of course, influence how the background is displayed, how out of focus it is, and so on. It all needs to be synchronized with the camera. Now, though, you have those tracker systems that make it cumbersome and expensive, and also hard to actually realize in a small studio, because of course, a volume, like those big studios, they have the advantage of having space, so you can even put a car in there or have scenes with a lot of people. I mean, we're in here in a small studio, for example, with 25 square meters. I don't know what that is in American units, but it's small. And it, like you wouldn't build something like that in here. But for product shots, like you could definitely do something in a corner here with a couple of very large TV screens, if you solve that parallax problem. Now, I mentioned already, you cannot do that with actually filmed plates, of course. You would have to have it computer generated. And what everybody is using in the industry is Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is that software that comes from Unreal, the computer game that everybody played many years ago. And that engine that they use to generate those environments is now used by Hollywood and many others to generate those backgrounds. And you can actually they have like Epic Games, they have like a web store. You can download those backgrounds. Some of them are free, some of them you pay for. So for example, you go there and you just, like pay for whatever, an environment on the sea, like you're surrounded by sea, or you're surrounded by whatever, or mountains, and dozens or hundreds of different backgrounds are available, and you can just purchase them and just load them into your virtual system. And then you have all the advantages of a computer generating this in real time, doing all the real parallax movements. So completely computer generated images that look real. Again, you still have the tracker problem. So how do you solve this? And those big trackers are problematic if you do smaller shots. Now, I talked to Eric Kessler and Chris Field to understand more of this, because it's not something that I work in at all. And the funny thing is, Chris is a nature cinematographer. He is somebody who films stuff like this, like time lapses of plants growing. And let me just skip to you see some stuff here. I just want to skip ahead to one of the shots some of the shots he does. He works for the BBC. He works for a lot of this, Discovery Channel, and actually does these ultra long time lapses of plants growing. And if you do those in real life, you would have to go out into the Amazon and just put up your camera there, and with all the difficulty of humidity and environment, and it's just very, very hard to do, and extremely expensive to do this in out and about. So basically what he does is he transfers a part of that nature into his small studio, recreating everything, recreating the day cycles, like recreating the light, having the same complementary plants that are around this plant, so the plant feels like it's at home, right? The humidity in the studio, everything needs to be perfect in order for this plant to grow. Otherwise, it just wouldn't work. It's a crazy process actually, but it's a very scientific process also. And of course, he's then dependent on virtual background because he cannot do an infinite background in reality. And he's used a lot of different systems. Now there is a company called Axibo that does one, which he used. The thing is with his stuff, it's super macro. So sometimes the entire movement that he would shoot in weeks is a few millimeters. It's crazy detailed. And none of the systems that he used was able to deliver what he needed. Then he used the original CineShooter from Kessler. And there's a very funny quote from Eric's like, this guy was almost the end of my existence because I offered him to buy everything back from him. He would spend hours and hours. They're a small company, right? Based in Indiana. He would spend hours and hours and keep his support staff on the phone just to trying to figure out stuff because his CineShooter couldn't do what he needed it to do. Like it would always, it would run for a few days and then it would just make a mistake and he would have to start over again. And it's like endless. And at some point he just said, look, either I buy all your stuff back and give you full price, so just leave me alone, or you just come on board and be a consultant. Just help me make a better product that actually does what you want it to do, and that might be a new market for us. So what they did, they worked together and developed CineShooter Plus, and what's special about that is it has complete, so this is Chris, it has complete Unreal Engine integration. So without using any trackers, you can use this remote head, kind of put it in front of your TV, connect it to their, it's called Chaos operating system, and film and don't have any trackers. The camera will always know where it is. And it's a very easy way on a budget because the CineShooter Plus is just over $3,000, I think, to create that kind of thing. And of course, we don't all shoot plants, obviously, but this can be replicated for any kind of product shots. Like, let's say you do a shot of a can of Coke on the top of a mountain. You don't actually have to go to that mountain. You can do that. You can put it in your studio. He actually does it with normal TV screens. He uses very large OLED screens, 2 or 3 of them, puts them behind, and then does shots like that. And of course, with product shots, it would be even much easier because you don't need to do the time lapse. You can do real time. So that's pretty impressive. So the whole conversation, we had a half-hour conversation about that kind of stuff, and very, very, I really recommend people to watch this because I think it's something that a lot of people, like a lot of shooters, don't realize. I think I see real potential here in general to have a little budget virtual studio that could give a lot of people an edge over their competitors, I think, because if you're able to build up a little studio like that and have that for example, if you're in product photography or filming, this could really make a difference, I think, if done right. Yeah.
Interesting. I mean, sorry that I was letting you talk alone for such a long time. I have zero expertise in this. And I usually like to just go out and about and shoot what I need to shoot and not to use engines or stock footage. But that's me, and obviously you too. But if this technology is here now and it's not so expensive, maybe it's worth looking at. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think it's just a sign of things to come. Of course, we've seen this at other trade shows also, that now lighting manufacturers are working on integrating with virtual studios more, of course. So, for example, I think I did an interview with Quasar at BSC over 2 years ago. They were one of the first ones to show a virtual background, and then had a setup at the trade show. I can actually look for it now, where you could basically, the light in front would emulate what's in the background, right? So you just stand in front of a TV and there's a fire burning behind you. And let me just look for that. Where is it? Oh, there we go. BSC archives. There we are.
2022.
Yeah.
Back to the Future.
So let me just, here's the example, right? You see they just put those lights on top, and then it replicates what you see in the background. Like here's a Vegas scene, as if you were standing in Fremont Street in Las Vegas. And everything is just fake, like all the light that hits us from the front are just tube lights from the top or from the side, and they replicate what's coming. And it's pretty impressive, actually. Like, you look at this fire scene here. I mean, for people who are listening to this, you can imagine a scene of a traffic accident in the background, and I'm standing in front of it together with, I think his name is Tim from Quasar, and we're talking about the technology that actually lighting our faces as if we are there. Of course, it's not perfect because it was a trade show, so there's some spill light, but it just proves that this is possible. You can, if you don't need a moving camera, you can do this already in your studio too, right? You can now fake a news report without being actually on the location. Or maybe be a safer war reporter, right? Like, I'm on the battleground, but you're not really there.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about the ethics of that. Yeah.
Sure.
Good.
Okay. Moving on.
Moving on. Let's move on, and now I'll let you talk a little bit.
Actually, let me ask you, Nino.
Yeah.
This is now almost 2 weeks after NAB, which was a very successful show for us, and I think for many of the manufacturers. Why are we still publishing videos from NAB now?
Well, we've long ago decided that it doesn't make sense to. I mean, there's always some products that are really like the fresh, hot news that needs to go out as quickly as possible because everybody's talking about them, right? So in this case, of course, it was the announcement from Blackmagic Design. They announced 3 new cameras, and I think we've talked about it in the wrap-up episode for NAB already, that we worked on those articles while we were on the plane to Las Vegas, because we just watched the stream from Grand Patty, and then we were already working on the articles. So this is, like we did the interviews first thing on the first day of the show, and those went out as quickly as possible. However, it's 4 days of a trade show, and this is the biggest broadcast / cinema, but especially broadcast show in the world. And
we did like 56 videos.
56 videos. Yeah.
That's without the social media stuff. And I think the short answer for this long topic, that there's a limit of how much people can see per day. And if we want what we did and put a lot of effort, love, and, it's really, there's a lot of good information out there. If we don't want it to disappear just like that, we better spread the news. I think it's also good for the manufacturers.
Yeah.
It's good for the audience. There's a limit of how much you can take per day. So,
and also, would you want to see 3 videos about new tripods on the same day? It's like, it's better to give them their own space to really consider and think about it. And nobody has time to watch 15 videos per day.
So that's our excuse, and we're kind of confident that we are on the right side here. But it will be very interesting to hear in general if people would like to see everything at once or as much as possible within the show days, or in all honesty, nobody really cares that the show is over. And what's really important is the actual information and the content. And even if it comes out a little bit later, it's still very much valuable and valid. And the good news is that we are just about to finish all of those videos and we are moving onward with new, fresh factory tours and also a lot of reviews coming up.
We just think that it's while we're there or while anybody is at those trade shows, of course, it seems like the most important thing in our world, but we are well aware that it's not, right? So people are working, people are shooting, we have a professional audience, and we don't think it makes sense for them to watch 15 videos per day. Also, we have a big team who's writing articles. They're all professionals from the industry. And we think it's valuable to, have somebody else write the article about a video that somebody else from the team shot, to get a different perspective or interpretation of that and put it into perspective. And otherwise, it would be a very rushed job to get all of this out during the show.
Yeah, that will be a lot of compromise, even if it's the featured image or the editing or the written stuff. But anyway, we are doing it a bit differently. There are other outlets there who are doing it in a different way. I guess everybody has an excuse and reason why they do it like this. But are there any products that you find interesting from whatever we published within this week?
A lot of interesting stuff. I found you did that interview, right? The Klaus and Tainer.
Actually, Graham, our colleague, did this, but this is a bit of an interesting story in general. What was the name? I forgot now. The name of the
NextODI.
NextODI. That's right. So NextODI was kind of a leader in this backup field, like small devices that you could run and gun. And I think we still have some of those devices. And they were acquired.
Well, we have to explain what they are. So basically, it's a portable backup device in the field for your camera cards.
That's what NextODI used to do. Yeah. It was a Korean company, and they were acquired by TV Logic, which is also a Korean company, and they are making mostly monitor screens. Actually, we have a very nice factory tour from a few years ago for TV Logic. Just watch it. It's just a nice thing.
We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah. But anyway, somehow TV Logic decided to kill this business or kill the product. I don't know exactly what happened there.
Which is so strange for me anyway, because we also had a Gnar box going out of business, remember? That did the same thing. And both of us, we always were like, why are there not more companies doing this? Even the big storage manufacturers, because I think it's such a huge market. If you made an SSD even if it's just an SD card reader or now it's all coming down to CF Express Type B mostly and SD cards anyway, right? Make a SD thing with a reader built in that gives me checksum verification when it copies stuff, and that's it. Every photographer would buy that. Every filmmaker would buy that. And there's hardly any solutions in the market, which I completely don't understand.
Yeah. So just to finish the story, the owner of NextODI, Larry,
former owner,
actually opened a new company, Clausen, and he just introduced a new device, the Tainer from Container, I guess. And it's a portable all-in-one backup stores solution that also have some possibility to send some stuff to the cloud. Quite interesting, very nice. There are two versions. One is with SSD built in, the other is without. So it's really up to you and which one to purchase. But we always say backup, especially when running and gunning, is so important. The risk of losing some material is like...
And that's why I'm so surprised, like when I'm on a shoot, and usually the most painful thing at the end of the shoot is to still sit and copy all that stuff for your director for them to take it for the edit. And it just takes time. And even if by now almost everybody has realized they should have SSDs and not HDs. But usually you end up with 200-300 gigabytes of footage for a day. And it just takes time. And then this could all be saved if you just had something in the field already that in between scenes or whatever, I could already do backup. And I seem it's mind-boggling to me that this is not a mainstream product, and that the big manufacturers in the industry still. I mean, there was something in the past from I think Lassie or something, but it was really slow and not really good, like a cloud thing, not cloud, like a portable thing. But it wasn't, it wasn't a professional product. But why? Why is this even something we still talk about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is one video or one product that actually I personally liked, and of course it makes a lot of sense. And the other thing is maybe more audio devices. Godox showed something. Or let's say differently, many of the Chinese manufacturers are really in this market right now. They're showing nice stuff. I think 32-bit float is not there yet with many of their products. Hopefully it will come because that becoming, it's almost like, all devices should be like this, including the possibility to record internally. So you send one, let's say, you send, of course, to the camera to record the audio, but you also have a hard copy backup. This is something quite nice, but it's a nice product from Godox. I think we briefly can say that Nanlux, Nanguang, the mother company, came up with another company. Goodtech, you made the interview, and now they're showing hard cases for different types of gears. Competition is always good, and that's
good to have more in this field. I mean, we all know Peli cases, good cases, but quite expensive. So it's good to have some competition in this field.
Yeah, especially if the quality of the product is good and there's some innovation in it. We don't want to see only copy paste. That's kind of defeating the purpose. Also, the market of video production camera cards is kind of growing up. We see some stuff from Digital Photo, and we saw some stuff from
the cards.
That's right, from Innovative. Actually, the Innovative one is very nice. It's kind of has a.
Is it innovative?
Innovative, yeah. It absolutely. It has its own little engine to push the thing.
It's an
up
electric.
The hill. That's
thing.
right. That's right. That's nice.
One thing I wanted to add to the audio stuff is the Rode mic, because you said a lot of the Chinese manufacturers don't have 32-bit float in yet. We did give one of the camera, Best of Show awards to DJI for the DJI Mic 2, which does have 32-bit float in the senders. But Rode also released a new interview mic. And actually, we use such interview mics. We right now use a Sony solution at those trade shows, which is great because we love it because it's simply. I mean, we used many other solutions in the past, and we use those hand mics simply because they're not the prettiest things. We know that. But they give so much better sound than the lav mics.
Now imagine that the microphone head would record it internally.
Yeah, and that's what Rode does.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the Rode can, apart from transmitting to any of the Wireless Pro, Wireless Go products that they have, it records 32-bit float internally. So you have that audio raw, quote unquote, built in to do anything you please with it. That's nice to have, and a nice backup, of course. Yeah,
absolutely. And then, if I have to want to highlight more things, first of all, it's really amazing what's happening now in the tripod field. And we actually saw a very nice solution from Falcam. The product name is Tree Root, and you made the interview. But that's the first time that Falcam is coming out with a tripod. And it's so well thought, actually. Yeah. It's very impressive to see what they did.
Yeah.
Kinefinity showing a new 8K prototype camera.
So generally, the Falcom, I was really impressed with that. I couldn't actually believe I didn't know that they didn't make a tripod before. And it was, like you said, it's very well thought out. It's just all the details, and it's kind of a competitor to, this is kind of a field that was really... It really became mainstream with the Peak Design travel tripod a few years ago, which was so popular on Kickstarter. And then many others, of course, followed suit when they saw how popular it was to make something similar. And this is one of the, well, it's not a review, of course, we've not reviewed it, but like in terms of the thought that they put in and considerations, it's one of the best ones I've seen.
Yeah. Bebop has a very nice, in between the Sony Burano and the actual V-mount battery, there's like a another solution in between to keep the camera going on. It's a very nice. It's a bit costly, but I think this is it's ML Micro.
It has a lot of a lot of ports and gives you a lot more connections. Yeah,
That's
which
right.
is one of the things that people sometimes complain about with the Burano. Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about is we had one very popular video, which was an interview you did with what's his name, Bob Poole.
That's right.
Who did a crazy thing. He took the Fujinon Duo 25 HZK 25-1000, so a massive box zoom lens into the field to film a safari. And just tell us a little bit about it.
We briefly touched this video in one of our podcasts right after NAB, but
it wasn't published at the time, I think.
That's right. But first of all, I'm really happy to see that this video did quite well in terms of audiences, also the Instagram reel. That means that there is still, people love the story, and it's not only about the product. And I did this interview with Victor Ha, Vice President at Fuji Film USA, and Bob Poole, who is a wildlife cinematographer. It's literally amazing. First of all, the idea to equip Bob with such a lens, as you said, send him to the safari in Africa, then Bob having to reorganize his Range Rover and make it work. Such a on one hand, of course, it makes sense that the focal length is absolutely great. And I hear many people asking why not the Canon. The Canon has a lens that starts from 50 millimeters.
51,000. Yeah.
That's right. And Bob explaining in a very clear way that he's specialized in filming elephants, which is a big animal. And sometimes the elephant will come very close to you. So the 25 millimeter lens, unlike a 50 millimeter lens, will simply allow to capture the picture or the video will be very powerful when the elephant is near you and you are in a wide lens. Unfortunately, due to copyrights, we were not able to show any footage from what Bob actually filmed. So we only have behind the scenes, beautiful behind the scenes.
But I saw actually Fujinon reply to the reel to a comment of somebody who made that yesterday that they will see it soon. I guess they will publish it separately.
Nice. I think it's a HBO thing. That Bob worked on. But I'm just saying it's just a very nice. One of those. It's a crazy show. So many products, and then you have the opportunity, and I'm very thankful for that opportunity to sit with Victor and Bob and just talk about safari.
Maybe we have to do more of those, actually.
Imagine
finding the actual users of products and then talk about that also at trade shows.
Imagine a show only talk about the usage and not the product itself.
Yeah, like an education show or something. Yeah. Good. Where are we?
No, and we did more at that time. The video was not online with Strada, Michael Ciani and Peter, his brother, and there's a very nice team behind them. Doing the AI-powered cloud work for content creators. And the main thing for me, actually there are two use cases there which are very appealing for me personally. One is the tagging. None of us is really doing proper tagging when we are editing. And this Strada can actually see the footage. It's amazing. It knows and it tags what it saw. So if you are literally searching for a cat or a cat with a ball, it can also do combinations. It sees the footage and it knows exactly where to point you.
That's what I found very interesting in the interview is like he's right by saying all the NLEs have tagging functions, but nobody is using it.
Exactly.
Because we all end up with so much footage. And I actually asked that question last week when we did here a local meetup of filmmakers, and I kind of highlighted some of our NAB coverage, and there were like 30 people standing there. Alex was there too. And I asked them, like, who of you is actually tagging stuff? Like nobody raised their hand. I think people only tag stuff if they have very little footage, but if there's a lot, it's impossible.
It just
takes
too
ages.
Much time consuming, and it's not efficient. And
it's also parts of clips sometimes. That's the problem, right? I mean, that's one thing that I like about Final Cut. It has this function, but again, you can actually select just a part of a clip and say, this is what's in there. but if you have a 10-minute clip or whatever, it's like impossible.
So Strada is doing it for you basically, and then it's very easy to locate stuff. And the second thing that it's doing, which is sometimes essential for our work, is transcribing and translating to like 100 languages. And it literally learn what you're looking for, what type of translation, and it will improve in time. And I'm saying in a very open way, when we do some factory tours, for example, in China, not everybody speaks English, or when we do some stuff in Japan, the ability to transcode and then translate into the language and have a proper translation, because we are using a very technical language at the end, white balance, or there's so many.
Well, also a lot of words of products.
Yeah. So I'm very curious to see and test firsthand to see how Strada is dealing with this type of technical words that we are using, and see if there are no mistakes over there. And if it is working, then it's really, really
great. And it's NLE independent, so
absolutely. I mean, you can connect different cloud services that you have into it. It can take the video from one place and the audio from another place. It sounds like a very nice, well thought through product, and I'm very curious to see where this product is gonna take the CineD brothers, and the team, because the team is doing a lot of stuff over there. Of course, they're not doing it alone, so that's very nice. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to highlight again is we did a episode with Markus before on the podcast about CineFlares. Markus Förderer, ASC, originally German DP in Hollywood, who shot Constellation, and he's about to shoot a new movie in Australia. And just before that, he's trying to put as much effort as possible into his CineFlares project, which is the most comprehensive lens flare library in the world. And it sounds very nerdy and niche, and it might be. But the cool thing is it enables you to actually compare the look of lenses without actually having the ability to touch them all.
So maybe you can very quickly touch, because some of the comments, maybe the people didn't really understand the service. People were kind of criticizing paying a subscription.
Yeah, first of all, it's extremely cheap. Like he's charging, $5?
Yeah, but it's not even about the money.
But it's more like, now the new functionality is really cool. You can, first of all, it's literally thousands of individual lenses and hundreds of different lens sets. So they put so much effort into testing all those and recording all that footage. And you can compare them. Let's say you're shooting a film or whatever you're shooting, and you're looking for a certain kind of look, but your local rental house only has a handful of those as usual. You can go in there, you can just compare what it looks like. And now in the Pro version, they added a function where you can actually also import image or even footage, I think. Actually, you can't import it, sorry, you can, but they have like predefined scenes. And in the future, it should be able to also import that stuff. But right now, you have predefined scenes, so you can actually not only look at those flares in front of black, like how they were recorded, but like a simulation of what your focal length would look like. So that's actually quite nice. So you have that scene of a desert, for example, because they shot in a desert to make it as neutral as possible. And then you can change your focal length. You can select the lens, and then it will show you what the flare will look like.
So for those who are asking why to pay for such a service, maybe just to say, this is not for everyone. But if you're in a production that requires you to see beforehand, you are DOP, or you want to show, or you want to consult, or you want to agree on a certain look and see beforehand how flares will be laid out on your footage, this is absolutely an amazing tool. And you can also compare stuff. And that's the reason why maybe you should consider to pay.
And there is a free version still, which has a limited amount of lenses in there. And it is a monthly subscription with $5, meaning you can cancel it at any time. So it's not a lot lost. And actually, he offered 20% discount for CineD readers, so you will only pay $4 if you use the code that's in that article.
So as always, check the free version, see if you like it, see if you need it for your workflow, if you need it for your production, and then consider to pay. But otherwise, maybe the free version is enough for you.
Yeah. Sorry. And I'm also very happy to announce that we are working with Markus on a small MZ course, because I was just chasing him, was like, he's doing these cool presentations about lenses, like lens flares in general. That's not particular about his CineFlares project, but in general, he has through all his work with different lenses for this project and also all his movies and series, he has seen and touched so many different lenses. So he can explain a lot of how to use lens flares in a creative way. And he's working on a nice little course for MZ that's going to be available relatively soon. He's working on it right now. He has to finish a lot of things before he's heading to Australia to shoot a movie. So time pressure is always the best to be productive.
Yeah. Somehow I think when we are shooting with anamorphic lenses, we always have in our head like, where's the flare? Where's the flare? But actually, I was very proud to shoot a little bit with the Fujifilm X106. I shot a mini documentary in an anamorphic way without even a single frame. And I was very proud because it's about
single
the
flare.
I said single frame.
Yeah.
Well, that's an achievement. Single flare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, because it didn't flare or just because it didn't point it at the light source?
I didn't want to force myself to put a light source in the image just to let it flare. Yeah, there was just simply no need for it. And when there is no need, there is no need. That's it. It has a unique look. Of course, you will see it looks a bit different. But yeah, when there is a need, there is a need. And when there's a need for a certain expression and you need the light in it, that's fine. But just to force myself to put a light, that's not how I work. And I guess that's not how you work too.
Yeah, I mean, it is a nice, if it happens, it should be a happy accident. But I mean, I just shot a whole documentary where I literally intentionally put lights in every shot, so it looks cool. But yeah, that's a different thing.
Okay.
Anyway, we'll show that will be part of my review of the Blazar Remus lenses. So,
which actually those lenses are really impressing us. But that's a whole topic. We will touch this when
I'm done with the review.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I think we can wrap it up here.
Yeah.
There was another hour or so, and thanks everybody for listening. Thanks everybody for watching. Next week, we're going to have more exciting stuff to talk about.
There's a lot coming next week.
There's a lot coming next week. Don't mention it. You are not allowed to.
Okay. I didn't say
people
anything.
wait.
I just said it's a very exciting week, and the podcast should be interesting.
Yeah,
that's right.
All right.
Okay.
See you guys next week. Hear you guys next week. And thanks for listening. Don't forget, we are on all podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or whatever is out there. And of course, YouTube. Please give us a rating of this show on those platforms, or on the platform you're listening to. That will really help us to get a bigger audience. And thanks for being here.
Thank you, guys.